you. Good morning, everybody. I want to start with just a couple of words about Cheryl Jensen. When I asked Cheryl if she would MC today, I wasn't sure what she was going to say. You know, she just retired, spending time with family, and she's moved out of town. And in fact, at her retirement party, I think the joke was that the city of Ottawa had recently achieved 1 million people, was back down to 999,999. So I think hidden in that joke is an important message, which is I think Cheryl's presence and leadership in our community is going to be missed. And of course, Cheryl immediately accepted to MC today, so thank you very much, Cheryl. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple of things today. The presentation is going to be split in two main parts. The first part is I'm going to give a bit of a readout of a report that CENGN commissioned recently with IDC and around the state of next generation networks in Canada. And then I'll get into some of CENGN's activities from the last year and some of the important things that we're doing. Bear with me, I'm heavily medicated right now. I'm losing my voice, so hopefully I'll make it through 30 minutes. Okay, so we commissioned a report from IDC to look at the state of next generation networks in Canada. We wanted to look at a few different things. What is the current state of adoption of NGNs in Canada? What is the economic and social prosperity opportunity from these NGNs? What is the importance of digital transformation for our vertical industries? And what is the state of the innovation ecosystem in Canada, and what are some of the recommendations that come out of that? It's a really great report. The author is here, Lawrence, thank you very much. It's a great work of analysis and research. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of a summary of some of the key points from that. Starting with, what is a next generation network? So NGN is in CENGN's name. We get that question asked a lot, and frankly, I don't think we struggle a little bit to answer that because it's not a single answer. But essentially, to us, NGNs represent all of the key technologies that will underpin the communication networks of the future. So if we start from the bottom, you know, we're looking at the proliferation of all of the user equipment that we use in our day-to-day lives increasingly. And then more importantly, all of the points of interconnection that will be important for the digital transformation of vertical industries. And we'll talk a lot more about that in this presentation. Going up the stack, we have the access network. This is where 5G resides. And we're asked a lot, you know, is NGN the same thing as 5G? And of course, 5G is a very, very important part of next generation networks and will be transformative for Canada and for the world. And we have a great keynote coming later this morning to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But the access network has all sorts of other technologies in there, including 4G, which will survive for quite some time, IoT, satellite will become important. Even the evolution of Wi-Fi will be important. So there's a whole set of innovation that's happening for the access network. The core network has been transforming already for several years, you know, from the static network that it used to be to a software-defined, virtualized, and distributed network. That's been really transformative for telcos, and they're still working through that transformation. And the advent of SDN and NFV has transformed their services and how they operate their network. So that's well underway. And then at the top of the pyramid is perhaps where most of the value will reside in time. And this is where data and AI and data analytics reside. So I think this crowd is quite familiar with NGNs and what I'm talking about here. But for us, having this reference model helps tell the story a little bit better. So what is the economic prosperity that underpins it? I think we all know intuitively that connectivity and networks enable prosperity, but the report does a great job of bringing that point home, and the numbers are quite staggering in terms of what connectivity does for trade increase, for GDP increase, and also for enabling innovation. And the point is made conversely that a lack of connectivity is really an inhibitor to the economic development and the social development of communities. So the economic imperative of next generation networks is very important. And key to that is the digital transformation of our vertical industries. So this to me is a staggering number. 60% of global GDP will be based on digital transformation in no less than 3 years. And we have some examples here of some of the industries that matter to Canada, but the point is that all industries will be digital industries. And we know today that more than half of ICT workers work outside the ICT industry, and that's because of the same point, that all industries are digital industries. So we have to look at how we're going to enable this digital transformation for the economic prosperity and the global competitiveness of those industries in Canada. And we'll talk a lot more about that. So where do we stand? You know, this is a long story that we could spend a lot of time on, but there's a couple of points that I want to make here. One is that in terms of pure connectivity, we still have some work to do, you know, just in terms of the speed of our networks, but also the ubiquity of access. And that is, you know, big divide between our urban communities and our rural and remote communities. So that's more on the commercial and personal side. But on the enterprise side, we also see that we've been much too timid in Canada in terms of establishing digital transformation strategies. So you see here that over 50% of enterprises in Canada either don't have a strategy at all or a mishmash of uncoordinated strategies. So that means that they're not set up for success in the future. And this is a global market. And if we don't make sure that we capture the technology transformation opportunity that will make us competitive, then we will lag behind. So the report then frames 3 national goals for the country and a set of recommendations around each of these goals. And I think this is for all of us, right? So the first one is realizing ubiquitous access to high-speed next-generation networks. You know, so this is really a question of equality at this point, and we just have to get it done. And the report talks about some recommendations around the government needing to set clear goals, probably having to increase the current target that is 50-10, because, you know, 50-10 was established some time ago and we're already past that, and having a coordinated infrastructure fund to fund some of the areas where the ROI is more difficult. The second goal is encouraging next generation transformation for vertical industries, and that requires some focus in terms of the skills development that is required, because a lot of these enterprises are inhibited by the lack of skills in terms of how to do that. And the third objective is driving R&D innovation and commercialization of Canadian intellectual property. And that's a big topic that is important to all of us here in terms of how do we make sure that we generate innovation and commercialize it here in the country. So I'm going to now pivot and talk a bit about what CENGN is doing right now. And what I found is that a lot of what we do is already framed along the lines of these goals that the report talks about. So I'm going to frame some of my remarks about CENGN along the structure of these goals. So starting with realizing ubiquitous access to state-of-the-art networks. And so this year we launched our remote broadband access program. This is a program where we're going to test and validate innovative technology solutions for remote and rural broadband problems. This is not a program where we're funding commercial capital projects. We want to fund projects that will create a blueprint of solutions that can be replicated and ultimately narrow that ROI gap that I talked about. I think there's always going to be a need for government and public investment because the ROI is difficult from a commercial perspective. But we do believe that there's an opportunity to make that gap narrower through innovative technology solutions and also business models. So we've spent quite a bit of time in outreach with communities and industry partners and also government in terms of what their policy objectives are to look at what we call problem statements. And we've actually come up with 12 problem statements, which we've categorized loosely into these 3 buckets. And it might seem fairly obvious now, but it's actually quite interesting when you dig into the details because not all remote broadband problems are the same, which means that not all solutions are the same. So starting from the left, last kilometer problem statements means that a community has internet access, usually in the school or in the city hall or something like that, but that the residents and the businesses in that community don't have access directly. Middle kilometer problem statements refer to where a community does have internet access, but a secondary community that might be just a few kilometers away, 10, 20 kilometers away, sometimes on the other side of the lake or behind the hill or something like that, don't have internet access. And there are countless of those examples in our country. And so that's what we call middle kilometer problem statements. And then, of course, long distance problem statements is what we sometimes mostly attribute remote access problems to, which is where you have a community that's quite isolated, perhaps hundreds of kilometers away from the closest internet pop. And so 3 different general buckets of problem statements means 3 different approaches to solutions. And we're going to be doing these projects across all these problem statements in the next few years, and we've already started. The first one, which is underway now, is around a middle kilometer problem statement, and I was hoping I would have been able to tell you today exactly where we're doing it, but we're still working through official announcements, so I'm going to talk about it more in generalities, but it's a community that has internet access, and literally across the bay, it's about 10 kilometers as the crow flies, there is another community there that doesn't have internet access. So we're going to establish a microwave link from the main community across the bay, and then a fiber to the home ring on the other side. And we're going to run that for the next 2 or 3 years, and we're going to see how that works, both technically and from a business model perspective. And we're about to launch our project number 2, which was going to be more last kilometer problem statement, probably around a wireless mesh type of solution for last mile. So watch for that. We'll be announcing or communicating our expressions of interest to the communities and the technology ecosystem to participate in these projects. So watch that space for project number 2. At the end of this, we hope that we'll have done several of these projects and that we can communicate a blueprint that says, in these types of situations, here are some of the solutions that work and that, bridge that ROI gap. Okay. The second goal, which was encouraging digital adoption. So CENGN this year started our smart mining program. This is a program where we're going to expand our existing test bed to put an actual test bed in a working mine. So we've partnered with NORCAT in Sudbury. So NORCAT is the Research Innovation Center in Sudbury, but they operate a real mine. It's an actual working mine that is there for innovation purposes. So we are going to be deploying a cellular infrastructure in that mine, actually cellular and Wi-Fi infrastructure in that mine to prove how those technologies work in a real mine environment. And then we will use also that test bed to do projects with innovative SMEs, innovative startups that want to prove how their technology works in a real mine environment. So we're in the process right now of deploying that infrastructure. And mining is one of those industries that is particularly well suited for digital transformation. There's some very interesting use cases that come from digitizing a mine, from inventory tracking. It's quite staggering the amount of inventory that just gets lost or misplaced in the mine. Health and safety for obvious reasons, but also autonomous vehicles, which is mining use cases is where some of the low-hanging fruits are for autonomous vehicles because of the repetitive, predictable nature of what happens there. So there's some very interesting use cases that can be tested out, and that will be an expansion of our test bed. So we'll put that infrastructure in the mine, and that will then be connected to CENGN's current test bed for computing and analysis of the data. So again, that's rolling out now in the next few weeks, and we'll be getting going on that shortly. Okay, and the third one is, again, driving R&D, innovation, and commercialization of Canadian intellectual property. And I think this really goes back to the core of CENGN's original mission. This is why we were funded and launched 5 years ago, is to help innovative Canadian companies, particularly SMEs, but also our industry partners, to test and validate innovative technology solutions. And I think in that context, one of the things that perhaps we don't talk enough about, and that's maybe our best kept secret, is our test bed. We have a quite unparalleled test bed and quite an asset for the community and the ecosystem in Canada. And it's undergone quite a bit of transformation in the last year. So we now have 4 data center locations with quite a bit of expanded capacity in terms of computing, both CPU and GPU computing, and a high-speed 100 gig network to connect them. But beyond the capacity elements of this test bed, what is truly unparalleled here is the implementation and the features that are enabled in that test bed. It's a full cloud native infrastructure, and so for those who don't know what that means, it means it's completely software driven, software defined, virtualized, containerized. It uses the best of existing technologies from industry partners, but also from open source projects. So we've built quite a bit of expertise in the open source world. It's obviously multi-site, as you can see, but multi-cloud. We have integrated or are integrating now a public cloud partners into the test bed for hybrid cloud tests and solutions. And we have wireless access in it. We have a LoRa antenna for IoT. We have narrowband IoT, and in the mine, we're going to be putting 4G LTE as well. So it's an asset that allows us to offer a whole range of services to the community, and that's what our SME clients use and our members use as well, around validation of technologies, validation of use cases, scale testing, recreating user or customer use cases before going to market to prove that it works. And all of that really is, the driver behind all of that is the expertise of our team. So this is not purely a hands-off offering. Our team works with our partners and our clients to conduct these technology projects and to fulfill as much value from them as they can. So it's been put to good use, right? So no slide deck is complete without some logo splash, right? But so it's been put to really good use, and we have quite accelerated our engagement with SMEs in the last year and continue to accelerate that, and really pleased with the impact that we're seeing from our engagement with clients. Already this morning, I was having some chats with some companies who were telling me how projects with CENGN have been transformative in terms of their go-to-market capabilities, and those are the kinds of stories that I love to hear. Okay, so what comes next, right? So there's some themes, that are emerging from this presentation, and as we've ramped our programming and our outreach to the community, we've been listening to our SME clients about what they value in the things that we do. Of course, we talk a lot with our government partners about what their policy objectives are and what they're trying to achieve, as well as our members. And so what we're looking at now is an expansion of some of the things that I've already talked about. And so again, for higher impact towards achieving those goals that were outlined here. And so we're looking at essentially enabling digital transformation across Canada. We want to expand essentially what we've already started with mining by creating living labs in various digital or various vertical industries, like the ones that matter to Canada, like forestry and agriculture and healthcare, manufacturing, smart cities, and create a set of assets, services, and capabilities that will allow us to accelerate our strategy and our technology innovation around digital transformation. I think, like I said at the beginning, that is somewhere, it's an area that we've been too timid in the country, and it cuts across everything that matters to Canadian economy and to the prosperity of all the citizens. And so I think it's a very important thing that we need to undertake. And underpinning this is really next generation networks. So if you go back to the reference model that I talked to at the beginning, we'll be looking at the transformative capabilities of technologies like IoT and software-defined networks and cloud computing and data analytics and AI to drive these projects. And we're looking at having significant impact. So we want to continue to do what we're doing, but at bigger scale in terms of creating ecosystems across the country and enabling the prosperity and the growth of several innovative companies. And ultimately, the goal is to create jobs and GDP growth for the country. Okay, so I want to thank you for being here. We have an awesome set of speakers today. I'm really excited about it. I'm very thankful for everybody to come here. The CENGN Summit is about creating connections, and we have our best attendance ever, and I think probably one of the best speaker lineups that we've ever had. So I really appreciate everybody being here. I hope to be able to connect with as many of you as I can during the day, so don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you very much.